So good afternoon, Mumbai. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming to visit us in Fujitsu World Tour 2016. A special thanks to our partners NetApp and Intel for helping us put on this great event. So you can clearly see from our themes today, we're talking about human-centric innovation and the role of digital transformation in that. I'm going to spend a little bit of time taking you through a journey that explains the way that Fujitsu thinks about this. And the reason why we're doing that is I think we're all challenged by understanding what we can make of this digital era. So the first thing to think about is, okay, how do we rapidly bring technology and ideas together to thrive in the digital world? If we want to succeed in this new world, we have to think digital. It's compelling. There's no way that we can survive as an organization, as a society, without embracing the opportunities that it brings. But there's so many challenges. There's so many deals of complexity. And we have to find ways in which we can think about those things in a structured and ordered manner. We have to allow innovation to happen at unprecedented pace. So how do we balance ICT and digital innovation in order to do things with confidence? Anybody working in business today is always challenged by the financial realities that we face in our markets. We need to convince our shareholders, we need to convince our investors that we can do it in a responsible way and that we can do it in a way that will actually bring a bright future for our businesses, our employees, the citizens that we interact with, and all of the facets that society would expect from us as responsible businesses. My colleague Ravi Krishnamurti kind of created this slide, which is great. I think we see digital as a set of waves that are happening. Obviously, most of the people in here actually grew up in the internet age. That created an unprecedented way in which we could connect things. It created new economies, it created new business models, it created things that were never possible before the invention of the internet. But even greater than that was the advent of the mobile internet. Once we started to see that people could actually interact and create businesses on the move, we've seen an unprecedented penetration of mobile devices. Interesting statistics is that even in developing parts of the world, like sub-Saharan Africa, we have over 70% penetration of mobile phones. And it's only set to continue in that era. Beyond that, we're entering the wave of the Internet of Things. So pick a number. You know, by 2020, we'll have 50 billion devices. Some people think it could be 60 billion. Some people think it could be as much as 1 trillion. The reality is that is going to create an unparalleled amount of data and information that can be processed in new and interesting ways. We can't imagine how some of this will actually affect the way that economies will work or businesses will transform. But even within that wave, we're starting now to see the fact that we have artificial intelligence and robotics that are going to exploit that data in new and interesting ways. What will the manufacturing sector look like in 20 or 30 years' time? What will the automotive industry look like in 20 or 30 years' time? How will travel affect the way that we interact with the world? This is giving us really new and interesting ways to think. The scale at which computing can now happen is bringing some of these things into reality. Artificial intelligence was always a dream of computer scientists 30, 40, 50 years ago. The reality is they did not have the processing power. They did not have the scale of computing infrastructure that could deal with these things. It's now here. It's now happening. And the way in which models are being created that can learn at unprecedented pace is a reality. And that is going to reshape some of our major industries. So, one of the challenges that we all face at the moment is digital is meaning different things to different people. Actually, that's a good thing. It's necessary. It creates thinking in a different way. First of all, there's business model transformation. We're seeing the emergence of companies coming out of nothing. I mean, Uber, Airbnb, All of these things didn't exist before. Airbnb is a great example. So here you have a multi-billion-dollar corporation with no assets, run by 65 guys somewhere on the planet. This is absolutely amazing. We have some examples like Lufthansa and Burberry changing their customer experience by delivering different examples of how their customers will interact with their services. We've got digitizing business operations. Very big players like GE have transformed the way that their operations work in a manufacturing sense to get even more efficient at delivering services. People like Airbus as well. The business model for airlines changed dramatically in that if you buy an airplane these days, actually you're just buying air miles. And companies like Airbus or Boeing are having to justify the fact that you're investing in their planes to stay in the air so that they can get more passenger miles, so that they can stay in business quicker, they can turn around flights quicker. Product leadership and innovation. So you're seeing all sorts of new innovations, even very traditional businesses like Philips coming up with brand new technology that are putting into consumer space. Companies like Tesla, actually creating a new era of electronic cars and electronic vehicles. So again, these are all happening because of digital transformation. Companies are now embracing the opportunity to bring things to market that would not have been possible 10 or 15 years ago. But that's at the business level. What's very interesting, and clearly what's been embraced in India, is the impact that digital can have to the economies of the world. Obviously, Prime Minister Modi is very forward-thinking. What vision does he have for the future of India? We see initiatives like Digital India, we see initiatives like Make in India, we see the National Supercomputing Mission. These are all fundamental steps in creating platforms in India that can help transform the economy of India. Indians must be incredibly proud. 50% of the world's global IT gets delivered from India. As a software economy, I didn't expect a clap for that, but anyway. As a software economy, you are on the precipice of something that is truly dramatic. The world is becoming a software economy. India has talent in abundance. India has innovation. While it's very frustrating in India, also the other thing is you are great experimentalists, right? One of the frustrations of the state system, or the state government system, is everybody gets to do their own thing. But on the other hand, that actually creates some of the great breakthroughs that you get in India. So it's fantastic to see how these economies and other economies will have to compete on that stage. And that too will drive their innovation. That too will bring in unprecedented change. So here's some interesting stats. We got this from Gartner case studies that were done recently. So they're looking at what the CIOs believe would happen in the private and public sector. So very interestingly, they think that basically within 5 years, 41% of all of the services from the private sector will be delivered on a digital platform. In the public sector, they see that even greater. I mean, if you can imagine the scale of the public sector challenge, they have to be much more aggressive. They're addressing a much larger consumer base. Citizens of the world will be increasingly digital. As the millennial base grows, expectations of how to consume services in the public domain will grow. So their expectation is that 77% of digital will happen. Whether that's the government IN portal in India, or whether it's gov.co.uk or whatever, all of these portals are being created, and you're seeing increasingly sophisticated ways in which these digital services will get delivered. That's an important trend. I actually expect the private sector will need to do better than this. I expect that we'll see the emergence of certain players in the market that will challenge these stats, that will actually force companies to innovate even quicker. So here's another industry vertical view on what they expect in terms of what they're seeing today in terms of the satisfaction of quality services. So I was actually quite surprised by this. So first of all, financial services. I mean, banks are traditionally seen as very conservative and very reserved in the way that they look at bringing about new services. But they are being compelled to actually bring out new services on digital. India is one of the best platforms. I mean, as somebody who consumed banking, I've lived in several countries during my lifetime. Banking in India is actually pretty advanced as a consumer. Actually, the notifications you get, the services you can access over your mobile portal, what's available on mobile phones is pretty advanced. That has to continue, and it will continue. And certainly if we see what's happening in the banking sector in India, as we start to see the repayment banks emerge, as we start to see every citizen in India having a bank account, that can only accelerate. And I can't see anywhere else on the planet where the opportunity in terms of innovation around retail banking is greater than it is in India. I think government has played a significant role in this. And that, again, this is a unique potential in India. With so many people untapped or unreached by the digital divide, once those people start to get into the economy, and obviously there'll be challenges in the way that they can consume digital services, but again, that innovation will happen. So I think these are really important things in terms of where we're starting to see the satisfaction of quality services. Transport is also a big opportunity. We have some case studies that we'll talk to shortly about how we actually go about that. So here's a great stat. So this is a survey that was done by Fujitsu across some 600 CEOs within various businesses, various industry sectors that we talked about. The other thing is about outcomes, right? So in business, if you're embarking upon digital projects, what's your probability of success? Actually, most people embarking on digital projects today, or the 600 that we surveyed at least, 71% thought it was a gamble. Because the reality is it's challenging their business model, or it's challenging their business processes. But they're compelled to do it. They feel that if they do not do it, they will get left behind. And they have to go through a learning experience in order to build that knowledge, build that understanding. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to compete, or they're not going to be able to be efficient, or they're not going to be able to hit their shareholder expectations. Similarly, in terms of digital alignment, right? Is the thought process, is the strategy of your company aligned to exploiting the opportunities that are going to arise in digital? Most people would say not. Our survey kind of showed that, is that actually there's a real sense that those people who are compelled to make the companies move in a digital sense do not believe that their organizations are sufficiently aligned to see the urgency or to see the opportunity within it. And again, that's challenges that we'll all face in our industry, whether it's Fujitsu, whether it's Fujitsu and its partnerships, whether it's technology players, you're going to face these barriers. And we need to embrace that in order to find out ways in which we can actually help the industry move forward. Going beyond that is, within your organization, if you are executing, what do you think the confidence is that you've got a strategy that's going to enable the right results to happen for you as a company? Actually, the expectation is very low, right? There is not a confidence within the organization that they understand or they can really exploit the opportunities that digital is bringing for them. That learning, that knowledge gap is there, and it's something that we all need to confront. So when we look at the world, we look at the scale of the digital opportunity, we look at the scale of what's happening to businesses, we look at the scale of technology that is coming into the market. There is a huge scale of opportunity, there's a huge scale of challenges that are going to come and face companies. So I'll talk a little bit about how those challenges evolve and emerge and the way that Fujitsu is thinking about working to solve some of those. Our vision is to have a safer, more prosperous and sustainable world. We are putting people at the center of the way that we think about digital. We think having a society-based mindset towards how you will actually create digital opportunities, how you will take digital transformation, is key to the way you're doing that. We believe that all of these things link together, and that if you put people at the center of your strategy, whether that's people in the sense of your end customers, people in the sense of your employees, people as citizens of the world, you will actually start to be able to frame things in a way that delivers business value to people. And one of the things that we have found in our conversations with our customers and the ones who have gone along on digital journeys with us, this echoes very well with the way that they're thinking about it and the way that they start to understand how to exploit the opportunities. So, around innovation, think about it in 3 ways. First of all, people. And this is multidimensional. This is people in terms of the end benefactors of something, but also in terms of the skill sets. It's also in terms of being able to bring the right skill sets, develop the right approaches in your people. Without that, you're not going to be able to embrace that. Without taking your customers on that journey, without thinking about the end consumption of that, the outcomes are likely to be disappointing. So critically important. Information. Of course, the big buzzword around big data and analytics. The reality is, as we start to be able to present information in new and interesting ways, it brings new possibilities to combine things we hadn't thought about before. That's the possibility that actually will bring to us even more innovative business models, even more innovative economies, and really start to change. Infrastructure. As we talked about, in the hyper-connected world, whether it's 50 billion connections or 1 trillion connections, it becomes infinitely more accessible to businesses, governments, corporations, to start actually using that data in meaningful ways, right? And that brings all sorts of challenges across the whole spectrum of technology, whether it's from storage, whether it's from networking, whether it's from compute, all of these things will bring a challenge to us. But we are at the start of a technology trend that is beginning to be feasibly address some of the scale challenges which were outside of our reach in the past. So, how do organizations face the transition to address some of these digital challenges? First of all, leadership and talent. Actually, this is probably, in my experience, what I've seen so far, this is probably the biggest problem we have. I'm standing here talking to a community of 400 or 500 people, talking about how do we think about digital, right? The emergence of leadership and talent within your organizations is what we're all going to need to cultivate in order to help us move to the next stage. And that's true of yourselves, that's true of your customers, that's true of anybody who's consuming it. And how do we do that and actually cultivate that talent and leadership? Customers, we all have a sense of security being fundamental to doing it under control, that confidence element. How do we do digital things? How do we do it under control? Security and the threats of cyber problems is at the heart of why companies hesitate. But we are now starting to get security under control. My sense is we understand the nature of threat, we understand what we need to do in order to control it, and we're getting much more sophisticated at defense. While, of course, there is infinite talent in people hacking, there's also increasingly an industrialized approach to the way that we bring cybersecurity. And Fujitsu very much fundamentally believes that's core to our strategy and how we build our solutions for the future. In that unprecedented scale of connectivity, complexity is a given, right? But we're seeing the emergence of AI, right? We're seeing the emergence of robotics. We're seeing the emergence that can deal with complexity in ways that we as individuals cannot. And the way that companies collaborate and bring together such emerging technologies will be key to handling that complexity. And that 2 waves of IT as well. Of course, we're all running business platforms today that our companies are critically requiring to generate our revenues and profits that sustain us. We can't neglect those. We have to deal with the complexity of having them and to moving to an era that allows us to innovate and transform our IT landscape and transform our ability to compete in marketplaces and defend ourselves. The last point is about behaviors, mostly about behavior, adoption. Is we only get the benefit from some of these things if we can actually see our people understand how to adopt technologies. We all know that from a consumer sense, When was PCs actually adopted en masse? When was mobile phones adopted en masse? Right? When's the web adopted en masse? There were certain fluctuations, there were certain aspects of changing. We're going to face that in digital. There are going to be all sorts of facets of digital that will force people to have to think in a different way about the way that they consume services or deploy services, or even they innovate to create services. Again, that adoption is going to be a key challenge for the way that we're moving or shifting to digital. So, one of the things that we like to think in Fujitsu, I guess one of the great facets of having a Japanese heritage, is this thing about putting things in balance. Trying to understand how we deal with all of these different facets of the challenge and move ourselves into a situation where we're peacefully creating an environment in which we can understand, adapt, adopt, and move forward. So, I'm going to talk about some case studies now. So this is a global retailer. We can't mention them for privilege reasons. This is a $23 billion fashion retailer. 2,500 stores, 130,000 employees worldwide. They're facing an unprecedented level of competition. The amount of online stuff that is happening in fashion, the market for innovation, small companies coming up and challenging every facet of the creative process the fashion designers go through. And we were a major infrastructure provider to them in their retail space. And they sat with us and said, look, you know, a very open and frank conversation, level of trust in having those type of conversations. They're saying, how can Fujitsu really help us understand how to compete in the landscape, both in an online sense and in an actual retail experience sense? So one of the things that Fujitsu sat and looked at them and say, well, how do you gain intelligence about the way that your customers are consuming services, consuming your products? And the reality is we worked with them to look at every facet of movement in a store. So, for example, we put sensor technology throughout a store environment. It detected very basic things, nothing exceptional in this, about footfall, entrance into the store, how long people spent in the store, which clothes did they go to, what colors were they selecting, which hangers did they go to, what type of setup, what mirrors did they go and look at, what elements of the clothing did, you know, let's say, females take. And then they started to build a profile with their customers' agreement of how to build up analytics that said, actually, these are the things that are of interest. And then on the back of understanding how these things are of interest to the customers, they then said, okay, well, from a loyalty perspective, if that customer, let's say, the lady particularly likes a pale blue, for example, is that if she were to go to another pale blue garment, let's give her a discount. Let's keep that loyalty in place. Let's offer her straight through her mobile device something that says, madam, if you'd like to try this garment, you can have it at a discounted price. That's a loyalty aspect of doing it. And then using all these different facets of the technology builds up a shape, and not building that up maybe in a demographic like stores in India, or building it up in, let's say, mainland Europe. You get different demographics, and it builds a very rich picture of how they can crunch the data to understand how they compete. Now, that's a sophisticated approach to using digital. Again, all data that they actually had, they'd never thought of using in that way. And that's a real good experience of digital. Okay, so this is a good one. I can actually name the customer here. This is GE Power. Now, unfortunately, the picture doesn't do it justice, because this is a gas turbine. This is gas turbine 9HA in the GE Power line. This thing weighs the same as a 747. It has hundreds of thousands of parts. The machining of this is some of the most advanced metallurgy that is going around on the planet. And every facet of the life cycle of producing this thing is very important. By the way, if you have a spare $100 million, you can buy one. Right? If anybody fancies buying one, it's about $100 million. Now, you can imagine, like, and the fact that this can support, I believe, about 500,000 homes from one power generator. So you can understand the key value of advanced technology like this. Now, every facet of that engine is monitored through a maintenance lifecycle. Every tool that goes into manufacturing it has to be understood from a maintenance lifecycle, from a calibration point of view, because the accuracy at which they have to build these things is directly linked to their longevity and their in-service life. And therefore, we worked with GE to look at that whole value chain in order to understand every facet of the powertrain, every facet of the manufacturing process, and monitor those things that actually made the biggest impact. We did a whole life cycle analysis of mapping out every facet of which component went where, and built a complete life cycle management and visualization that could show how they could keep that in service. Massively impacts the way that they go to market. Very significant in the way that they think about building their next generation of products. So again, digital. All things that were in their supply chain, all things that were happening, and then we take sensor technology into that domain, and suddenly we have a new way of thinking about it. So here's one. Any budding parents, any ladies who are expecting babies, there's always a phenomenon of premature births. It's a very stressful time for parents. Now, not unlike India, if you think about the geography of Australia, the hospital in Canberra is actually servicing an area of about 800 kilometers radius. Now, obviously, traveling back to the hospital, premature babies in many cases cannot leave the hospital. Now, you can imagine as a parent the stress of having to travel perhaps up to 800 kilometers away is an incredibly stressful time for a newborn baby. Well, for the parents of a newborn baby, rather. Now, the reality is that the hospital, the clinicians understood that this stress that was caused by this environment required some new thinking. But obviously, within a hospital environment, there are processes and procedures for handling premature babies. They have to be moved. They have to be put in new environments. They have to be treated in certain ways. So how can they show what's happening to the baby in an interactive way such that parents could log in securely, watch what's happening to their babies, understand that, could get feedback from clinicians about what they're doing, could understand the health, and God forbid there's anything, they could move to the hospital when they needed to. So Fujitsu worked with Canberra Hospital, and we worked with some partners who provided us a specific network infrastructure that allowed us to put video feeds onto monitoring of babies, but also put the tracking technology such that if the babies had to be moved, the video cameras could move with them, or the video feeds could move with them, so that the parents could always see their baby and what was happening to their baby. The benefit here is that those parents were a lot less stressed. They felt that the hospital was really listening to what they needed, was understanding that. Now, if you can imagine scaling that up to a situation in India, that would be an amazing benefit to society, amazing benefit to the way that healthcare gets delivered. So, being Scottish, protecting whiskey production is very key to me. Now, actually, this is not all about whiskey, by the way, but it's a key point. Scottish Water deliver freshwater supplies to about 2.5 million homes throughout Scotland. Actually, this was a case of cyber attack. Utilities on a global basis, some studies that were done recently, the attacks on utilities by hackers has grown over 500% over the course of the last 2 years. Scottish Water were the victims of such an attack. Now, they actually asked our cyber intelligence unit to come in and help them. We provided infrastructure. We didn't actually provide the security platform for them. But because of our reputation in the market, we provide security to many government departments, including some very high top secret departments. They understood that we would understand the problem. So we deployed our security team. We deployed our intelligence probes into their network, and we found the source of the hack. It was a very sophisticated hack, by the way. Some very latest. Even though the IT governance within Scottish Water had deployed all the latest patches from the software vendors, the reality is they were still vulnerable to this patch, and it was spreading throughout the network. We deployed our security skills. We have a security operations center, which we deployed in that, and we got into the attack, and we understood, and we closed it down within hours. Again, it's an example of critical infrastructure for an economy that could be impacted by such things. And once we build the intelligence, working with them in a way that could actually then protect them, and of course, we then obviously won subsequent contracts with Scottish Water that helped them protect from those such services and understand how to put their systems under control. Again, critical infrastructure that we are supporting. So this is a nice example. I really like this one because it's in Russia, one of the biggest retail banks is Sberbank. Now, actually, they have a very good process of dealing with schools and so on. And the reality is that they were looking at innovative ways that they could deliver new services. One of the things in Russia is school meals get actually paid typically in money. Now, kids being kids, the reality is there was many incidents of kids losing their money, being bullied or whatever, and getting money taken from them, or actually spending their money on all the wrong stuff that their parents wouldn't want them eating in the first place. So again, Sberbank, as a financial institution, worked with the schools and said, well, how can we help you deliver innovative services? And what they talked about was, okay, they wanted a contactless payment system. So something whereby, obviously, the parents could go online, deposit money in, the kids could wear a device, a wearable device that basically went into it, and then actually would also show them what foods they were buying. So not only was it a case of them actually having the money, or basically an online transaction that they could pay for what they were doing, also showed their parents what they were eating. Again, so this was piloted in about 20 schools and actually it's now been rolled out in over 200 schools. A great idea of a bank thinking about a new economy, a new way of working, a new way of actually delivering better value to their customers. So Cambios de Portugal is an organization that has over 100 million passengers go through their rail network every year. This was a case of, you can imagine, with a volume of 100 million passengers per annum, they had an issue with payments, right? Not in terms of collecting payments. The reality is congestion at payment counters, congestion going through turnstiles, congestions of all different sorts. And they wanted to find a way in which they could create a contactless payment system that would allow passengers to have a much better experience of going onto trains and consuming the services. So again, Fujitsu has a lot of these solutions in the transport space. There's another one coming up shortly. And we worked with them to come up with a contactless payment cards system that basically allowed their consumers to basically top up these cards, essentially pay online for services, and seamlessly walk onto trains with everything paid in advance. Again, it dramatically improved the customer experience in train stations and on trains, and obviously their operators could, rather than having to check tickets and so on, simply their operators could carry a PDA around and simply scan devices as they went through the trains to see that everybody had paid their services. Very simple use of digital technology, massive transformation to the customer experience that was had. Richardson Police Department. I mean, the very sad events around 9/11 forced law enforcement authorities throughout North America to reconsider the way they looked at their response times, their carrying of armaments, their ability to actually track everything that was being used within a police vehicle. And Richardson, which is in Texas near Dallas, had a very advanced view of saying, we need to be able to track vehicles, we need to track everything in vehicles, we need to track which officers are using what devices, we need to track what's being the maintenance status of all those items, we need to track uniforms and material in order to understand the full life cycle of how these armaments and how a police was being able to respond to it. So Fujitsu worked with our IoT platform. Our IoT platform is called Globe Ranger. We set up a set of RFID technology and various scanning technology, including barcodes, etc., that we put throughout all of the items that a police vehicle would use and the police officer would use throughout their life cycle. We created a system that allowed them to track this to 100% accuracy. And legislation is happening in the US such that this is becoming mandatory for law enforcement forces to use, and also the military to that extent. So we created this technology, and we created a platform that did this, and this has been a very successful pilot. They cut down their response times, which were averaging about 1 hour for any major incident to dispatch a police vehicle fully armed and fully monitored, to less than 15 minutes. So something that made a dramatic sense to the way that the Richardson Police Department served their community. So this is a large-scale project. So this is Singapore. So Fujitsu has very advanced high-performance computing technology. The Singapore government, in collaboration with many of the commercial institutions and research institutions in Singapore, were looking at how do they create the most advanced nation in terms of being digital. One of the things that they did is they look at, for example, Singapore is one of the busiest ports in the world. At any one point in time, there can be up to 200,000 ships in the Singapore Strait, all trading with Singapore. So they actually worked in terms of the universities and with the port authorities and with some of the commercial entities, used Fujitsu's infrastructure to come up with a solution that used our traffic management technology, something called Spatial, that looks at the movement of vehicles and people throughout this, and basically come up with a way that they can optimize the flow of goods in and out of Singapore port. Great example of them using it, and then this HPC is going to be deployed in many other research domains to similarly benefit the Singapore government. So this is one of our great milestones in Asia Pacific, and something that Fujitsu is justifiably very proud of. But again, this is a good example. We have a very similar example in Japan. And in discussion with National Supercomputing Mission in India, we're also exploring opportunities where we could bring similar concepts or similar thinking to the way that India will evolve its national supercomputer grid. Again, in society, obviously we have an aging population. I believe the statistics go that something by 2020, there will be over 600 million people above the age of 60 in the world. And clearly, dealing with the challenges of age, there are all sorts of different facets that we need to do that. With the Government of Ireland and with Institutes in Ireland, we looked at how could we actually bring technology to bear in an assisted living environment. So whereby local councils or local healthcare authorities could look at how do we actually put technology in to perhaps track the health, track the consumption of food, track the consumption of things like blood pressure and so on, in a way that is not invasive to the way that people live. So we ran a number of pilots with people in these communities and came up with a solution that basically interacts with the local health authorities and brings in contact with them various statistics about the behaviors and patterns of people as they're getting older. And obviously we'll inform and invite people, whether that be doctors or physicians, about problems that are occurring, or intervention. If somebody were to fall, it could detect the fact that they'd fallen in their home and they would need assistance. So again, these are things that we're trying to get in a non-invasive way to look at the impact that will have. Clearly, if you think of the long-term cost that we'll have in terms of healthcare, such innovations are going to be necessary in future in order to be able to deliver services even better. So here's another, tangentially, looking at the way that the Japanese agriculture economy is evolving. So as with India, Japan is a very proud agricultural nation. And its net exports of Japanese foods and goods is increasing all the time. Conversely, the number of people entering the agricultural field of employment is decreasing all the time. Japan is actually facing a big gender and age gap in terms of people wanting to enter into agriculture, and that is causing a real concern about the longevity of supporting some of these businesses. So again, Fujitsu worked with the Iwata Prefecture, and it worked with a financial services company, and it worked with a seed manufacturer. And what it did is that with the Iwasa Prefecture, they created basically greenhouses that looked at the optimization of the way that water and nutrients were fed to plants in a greenhouse environment. Fujitsu has an agricultural middleware platform and solution called Akisai that was used in the deployment of this in order to increase the yields and understand the benefit of this. And do this in a highly automated way that cut out a lot of the manual effort that was previously required to do this. And clearly created a sensor grid and a computing backend that looked at all of the facets of delivering this type of technology in a large scale. That was very important to the way that basically Fujitsu would help this. And again, this is something that we're doing in a number of different things. You'll see outside in terms of one of the demonstrations, us connecting to dairy farming. So we have a number of these application spaces that are looking at this. So this is one of my favorite ones. So, okay, so everybody understands about OCR. OCR is not a new technology. But you can probably imagine with the 800 million or so different Chinese characters that can be created, that OCR is a particular challenge in this domain. Actually, basic OCR technology for Chinese characters can do recognition up to about 94.7%. I rehearsed that very carefully, 94.7%. But you can imagine that actually as the deployment of Chinese character sets and the Chinese economy continues to grow, actually being able to read this more accurately is quite important. Now, OCR technology, we believe, has kind of reached its limit in terms of its accuracy. And if you think about the way that handwritten calligraphy is done, the number of defects or deviations or so is very difficult. A human being, its accuracy in reading Chinese characters, obviously educated well enough, is about 96%. It's actually about 1.3% gap. Fujitsu has deployed AI technology in order to boost the OCR recognition of it to around about 98%. Now, that doesn't seem like a big thing, but if you could imagine the number of documents, the number of things that have to be processed, it would make an enormous difference to the productivity of having to understand these types of character sets. And of course, that would obviously span to other types of calligraphy. But again, a great example of how to use it. Probably my colleagues in Japan, this is their favorite one. So a bit of a strange title. Can a robot get into the University of Tokyo? So anybody in academia will know that the University of Tokyo is one of the premier mathematics institutes in the world. What Fujitsu did is have an AI challenge. So they worked with the University of Tokyo and said, could a robot take the entrance exam to the University of Tokyo and pass? I'm not sure why they want robots in the University of Tokyo, but that's a different question. Anyway, just the actual challenge of being able to write such advanced AI software that would understand the context of different things. And this is not rote learning. This is at random mathematical equations fed into a robot, and it come up with the right answer. And so far, the challenge is by 2021, can you do it without fail to get into the University of Tokyo? As of last year, we passed, right? And they view that the AI technology will continue to evolve as we deploy more compute resource to it, as we understand the modalities of learning in this context, we can build it. I mean, not that this is an isolated example of how neural networks are now being used to deploy very abstract concepts. It's no longer the binary concepts that we're using in industry. It's abstract concepts. Okay, so getting towards the end of my presentation now. So Star Mobile, last example here. Fujitsu had a long history of working to provide train operating companies with ticketing solutions. And they were always the general manual ticketing solution that we know. But what Fujitsu did is we collaborated in a pilot. We actually took some Fujitsu people, we worked alongside this particular customer, and we actually went through chain journeys over a few months, looking at the different aspects of interacting between train operating companies and so on. And again, we created a completely separate mobile platform that could do all contactless ticketing. And again, linked to banking and payment systems, linked directly into the banking accounts of our clients. And it was a very successful pilot and something that will be rolled out in scale. So we have some opportunity, and over 70% of all ticketing in train companies in the UK is done by Fujitsu. So again, a great opportunity for us to innovate in that industry space. Okay, I won't go on to this, just to say that, again, we can talk very clearly to customers and partners and technology providers about the different projects that Fujitsu has been involved in through many different spectrums in industry. And again, this experience is real. We are going through these digital journeys all over the planet and all over our key markets. And clearly, India being one of our target markets, this is something we'd like to share with you. So last and not least, fundamental to all this is collaboration. Fujitsu's heritage prides ourselves in listening first. We want to build digital experience. We want to be a leader in digital transformation. We want to work with you in new ways and new models, new business models, and create new value that is great for end users, employees, and society in particular. And that's a journey we want to go through with you. Key to that is some of the way that we combine our technologies. One of the things that Fujitsu has worked incredibly hard over the last 2 years is take the plethora of technology that we have in our portfolio and bring them together that is clearly targeted at helping people go through a digital journey. I won't talk too much about this because my colleague Kathy McCann will be up presenting to you. But importantly, we've thought very carefully about how we bring the different aspects of these technologies to bear to help people on their digital journey. And we'll be working on that with you. So, our vision, as I said up front, is for us to be a safer, more prosperous and sustainable world. That's key to the way that we're going to act, key to the way that we see how we'll consume these things. Okay, so that's the end of my speech. However, you cannot be let off. You're all going to be tested to see if you're listening, right? So when you go out, please visit the exhibition. Please think about an application of digital technology in your context, in your business or your environment or your end users, and come and talk to us about that. Come and talk to us. Come and talk to our great partners, NetApp and Intel, about those things. Have a look at all the stands and presentations and interact with us. So thank you very much. And before we part, I'd just like to show you a short video that introduces some of the key concepts we've talked about today. Thank you very much.